Sorry, looks like I was on mute. Okay, hello everyone, and I'm Sunny Prasad, and welcome to today's meetup. Today, we'll be learning about Flutter widgets with Maliha from DDU DSC, Naryad. And let me welcome Maliha. Hi, Maliha.
Hello, Sunny.
So let me tell you something about Maliha. She is an Android, not yes, she's a developer. You can call her developer. She's an Android developer with DDU DSC. She's a student basically, and she has started learning Flutter in last 6 months, and she made an app for management of DDU DSC chapter, and she has also made she has also published a package on pub.dev to create charts, to draw charts on Flutter, and it runs on web too, so you can check it out. And uh, so how has been your experience with Flutter, Maliha?
Pretty good. I started with Java, but then after moving to Flutter, I realized how easy app development could be. Pretty good.
So so tell us about today's session. What are we going to learn today?
Okay, so the main aim is to build a UI. That is, we'll be building a page, an entire page in Flutter. But before moving to that, we will also see some of the basic widgets that we will be using in building that application. Some most basic widgets like containers, rows, columns, and also custom paint and animations in Flutter.
So will we need something special or some kind of setup on our computers, or
So
we have another way?
to build Flutter applications, you generally need a Flutter SDK. But today we're not going to use that. Today we are going to use dartpad.dev, which is an online editor for Flutter, where you can write code snippets in Dart. And we will be building the entire UI in Dartpad itself. So no, you will not need any installation, just a good internet connection.
So okay, I'm excited to see what we are going to learn today. And so everyone, you can follow Maliha while she tells us how to build different kind of widgets, and you can turn on your dartpad.dev, or you can also do this on CodePen, right, Maliha?
Yes, sure. You can use
Okay.
CodePen or Dartpad.
Okay, so stage is all yours, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. Okay, so is my screen visible? Yes, it is. So good evening, everyone. And today we are going to learn how to build UI with Flutter. So this is basically the screen that we are going to build at the end, entirely in that. But before moving on to that, let's see what widgets are. So any Flutter developer will tell you that everything in Flutter is a widget. So here in the screen, any containers that you see, any of this box that you see, the text that you see, any of these bubbles that you see, the cards, everything is a widget. And not just that, the entire Flutter application, it in itself is also a widget. So then what are these widgets? So in Flutter, you can build your UI out of these widgets. They are basically a blueprint, and Flutter will, if you use a widget, Flutter will know how to render it. So like if you want to display multiple widgets in a vertical in vertical direction, so then you can use something called column. And very intuitively, if you want to display it in a horizontal manner, then you can use a row. And if you want to give some space around these widgets, then you can use padding and so on. So we will see these widgets in a little detail. So let's just go to dartpad.dev itself. You can search for, let me go to dartpad.dev. So you could practice this along with me, or you could just observe what we are doing and then later try it out at your own time. So this is basically how dartpad.dev is going to look. Well, let me first introduce you to Dartpad itself. So this is an online editor where you can create code snippets on Dart as well as in Flutter. So you can create a new pad from here. Okay, and yeah, so we'll be choosing Flutter because we're going to create a Flutter application. So some basic code will be shown over here. Well, this is to reset your code. That will just reset anything that you have written. So don't tap there. This is an option to format. So say like my indentation is not proper or something. If I tap on format, then it will put everything in perfect order. So then you don't have to worry about all of that. And this install SDK. This is an option that is going to take you to somewhere where you will be able to find steps of installing Flutter. Obviously, you can do a lot with Dartpad, but there are limitations. You can't build an entire application in Dartpad. So if you find this session interesting, and if you're interested in going further with Flutter, you can go to this link and you'll be able to install Flutter and then build apps in no time. And this is an option to run the application. You can also press Control Enter to run your application, and yes, it just shows us Hello World. So this is a very basic code that is there. So let's go through it, like what is written over here. So the first statement that you see is import statement. That is basically like your hash include in C. So this from the package Flutter, we are importing the material library, material.dart. So all the widgets that Flutter gives you, they'll be coming from this particular file, material.dart. Now, what is material? So Google has defined some design, some style guidelines, and Flutter basically uses those, which is why Flutter applications look this good. Look, the UI is beautiful because it is built on material guidelines. Then this is just a static color that is a final color variable that is defined. We'll see how to do that. So the another important thing is over here. This is void main, like in Java or in C, wherever you would write a main method, right? So this is the entry point of your application. And that says to run the app, my app. So that is defined over here. So well, it extends stateless widget. What is stateless widget? We will see soon. But yeah, so basically this creates our class into a widget, which has a method build. So that is going to define what this particular widget is going to return. Okay, so we are returning. So you don't have to actually remember this. Like whenever you create a new pad, this will already be given to you. But it's pretty intuitive. Like you need an import statement, you need a main method to run your application. So then this my app is returning a material app. Now, what is a material app? So as I said, the Flutter applications are built in material guideline. They follow material guideline. So in order to do that, you need to enclose your application in this material app. As we said that the entire Flutter application is going to be a widget. So this is the widget that we were talking about then. And you can give different properties to this material app widget that is there. To any whenever you use a widget, so you are going to need you will be defining it. You are going to be using the name of the widget, and then it will have multiple properties that you can set. So we are setting the theme. So this is just used. So if I remove this, we don't even need this theme for now, just for a simple application. Let's just remove this theme part. So now you can see it's just a white screen, and then we are just returning this hello world. So then we have something called scaffold. So what is a scaffold? In any application, in any Android application that you would have seen, there is some basic layout that is defined and that is used by almost all the applications. Like you would have an app bar at the very top of your application, or you would have some buttons, a floating button at the end, a drawer at the side. So all of these, you could make it yourself, but to make it easy for you, Scaffold has these properties already available. Say if this is app bar, and if I say, that is how you define an app bar. This is going to give you an app bar. Let's see what properties it has. There is something called title. Yes. Okay, so let's see. So yeah, one another thing very good about dartpad is the documentation tab right here. So when you will see that title requires a widget, but this is a string. This is not a widget. So you have to wrap it around a text widget. Also, the name of widget here, they are very intuitive. So now if you see text, okay, it gives a documentation over here, creates a text widget, and it takes a string data. Now it should run. And that is how easy it is. You can see just by writing this one line of code, we can create an app bar. And okay, so now when Flutter gives you these widgets that are there, but you can also build your custom widgets. So when you do that, say this my widget thing that is there over here, we are building that widget ourselves. And what is that returning? So that is just returning hello world over here. So let's see some of these widgets. So the first widget that we are going to see is a container. What is a container? Let's look in the documentation itself. So it says that a widget that combines common painting, positioning, and sizing widgets. So say you have this text, you want to create a box around it, you want to constrain it, and you want to give it some padding or a color, something. So then you can wrap this text around a container. And let's see what properties this container has. So it says color, you can give a color to it. The very important properties that are this height and width. So let's define that. Now to define the color, there is something called a color class. And in that, so in the colors class, you will have all these colors which are defined for you, and you can just use them. So that is going to give us a container. Now, why is it shown in the center? Is because this my widget is wrapped in a center widget. So that's why it shows you in the very center over here. So that is about container. Now, in Flutter, when you would want to build your UI, you are going to create a tree-like structure, a hierarchical structure. Like in HTML, you have some tags inside which you create other tags, like an unordered list, and it will have list items in it, right? So if you have experience in HTML, you would know that how layout is created in a hierarchical manner. Similarly, with Flutter, we have this child property that is available to most of the widgets. And inside that, we can give something like, say, text. So that is going to display this text inside the container. Again, you can give it padding, you can center it. So that is how one inside the other, you can keep this widgets and they will be built in that order. So that is about container. Now let's see something called a column. So by the very name, you can see that column is used to display your widgets in a vertical direction. So now what properties does column take? It takes a children widget and not a child widget. Again, very intuitive that you would want multiple widgets here. So there won't be a child property, there will be a children property. And I can put my container inside over here. And let me create multiple containers, right? We would want multiple children. And as you can see that these are displayed in a vertical manner. So now you can see some error that it has overflowed by 136 pixels. So yes, column won't give you scrolling by default. So for that, you need to use something called a list view. Instead of column, if I use list view, then you can see that we can have a scrolling available over here. So instead, let's just reduce the container sizes because we don't want to use a list view for now. That was about column. Similar thing is a row. So that is going to display it in a vertical manner, in a horizontal manner. Sorry. So then you have different properties available to row and column itself. There is something called a main axis size. That is how much do you want your widget to occupy. So that has two options, max or min. So that is going to define how much space you will occupy. And so currently it does not because you have not wrapped it around something else. Like say if I wrap it around a container. And this container, we can give a width of, okay, so now when you would want to get the size of your screen, you can use something called media query. And from your context, size, and then the width of your screen. Okay, so now if I remove these width available over here, now it is taking up whatever space it requires. Now we have something called main axis alignment. Now by default, this main axis alignment is at start, but you can define different alignment, right? Say center. Then it will take all of your widgets in center. But mostly what you are going to be using is the space around and space between. Say if I say space between, then it's going to create some spaces among between these widgets that you are using. A similar thing can be done for column as well. It's going to keep some space between them. If I say space around, then it's going to create give some space over here as well. So that is about rows and columns. Then we have already seen list view. So what list view does is it takes up entire range, entire space that is available to it. Currently, we've defined the container. That's why it only takes this size which the container is taking. We have only defined the width. But if I remove that, I have specified the height. That's why it takes up that much height. Okay, then another thing that you have with list view is the scroll direction. Not the scroll direction. Scroll direction, which you can give as, okay, so that takes an axis dot vertical by default, but you can give it an axis dot horizontal as well. So then it defines in which direction is it going to scroll. Currently, I only have these three containers, but if I have more, then you can create. So it creates this horizontal scrolling. That is about list view. Then similarly, you wouldn't want just scrolling in one direction. So then you can have something called a grid view as well. So not just one widget in your main axis, you can have multiple. So grid view, you can create it from count. That is, currently we will specify how much count we want. So it says that the cross axis count is required. So if our main axis by default, which is going to be vertical, the cross axis that is in horizontal, how many number of widgets do you want over there? So for that, you will define this cross axis count. Say I want 2 of my widgets. Then it will put 2 in one in the cross axis. If I say 3, then they'll put 3 in the axis over here. You can also have a horizontal scrolling in grid view that is available. Let's see what other properties it has. We have something called cross-axis spacing. Whenever you are using these properties, you can always see what kind of what value it expects. Right? It says over here that it expects a double value, or say if I use a padding widget, then it's gonna, let's see. Okay, so before that, if you want to create some padding around the grid view, then we have this padding available. So then this padding says that it requires an edge insert geometry. You can't give a double value over here directly. Then I can use edge inserts dot all. So that is going to create padding in uh, all the directions, top, bottom, left, and right. So that you can see this padding that it has created. So similarly, you can explore more properties of grid view as well. Let's see what other widgets. So we have covered, okay, most of them, yes. Say if I have a container, okay, we require a semicolon over here. Okay. Now we wouldn't want this hello to be so much like attached to the container. You would want some padding. So then you can wrap your any of your widgets with a padding class. Format this. Okay. So then it says that the padding property is required, because why else would you use it, right? As we have already used it, we have something called edge insets.all to create padding in all the directions. We have something called symmetric. So that takes like, okay. In symmetric, we can have vertical and horizontal. So in just vertical will, as the name suggests, create padding only at the top and the bottom. Horizontal would create padding at the left and the right. Here I say, so then it is creating a horizontal padding that is in the left and the right. Then it also have something called edge insert dot only. So then what does that have? So it's over here, it has a left, top, right, and a bottom. So you can give different values for all of that. So we have covered most of these widgets. Now, something called stateful and stateless widgets. So the thing over here, what we wrote, a stateless widget. So what does that mean? So that is, every time your app is built, this thing is created. It knows that it has to display a container and a text in between, like so. That is done once. But so then you would want to change your state. Like the text that I have shown over here, I have said hello. So I would want something like a dollar count value. Let's define that count over here. And say I want to change that count. But it shows me a warning over here, says that this class is immutable. So there is no way that I can like it does. It advises me to not use fields which are not final. So it always has to be a final field. So the value won't be we won't be able to change the value. Uh, so we can have something like a stateful widget. So what is that? Let's see. Basically, stateful widgets will allow you to have to change the state of your widget, the entire class. It should give me an error over here, and after I press Alt Enter, it asks me to create a missing override. Okay. So in the create state method, I could give something known as a state. So what is this? So in stateless widget, you only have this one class in which you have the build method, which returns what your widget should look like. But in stateful widgets, you have something, this method available, which is create state, and that is going to return your state. So then you will have to define the state as well. And that is going to extend state of what type, of the type of your widget. And that is going to have this build method available. And here is where you can say what you would want to return. Let's shift it count variable in our state itself. As of now, it shows no change. But say that I wrap this container that I have, I wrap it with something called a gesture detector. Again, a new widget. So that is going, so what does this gesture detector does is, where you have buttons which are the default widgets for buttons that are available. But if you want to have gesture detection in your own widget, like this container, I want that whenever I tap this container, this count value should change. So then this gesture detector has a property, it has many property to detect different gestures. Let's see them. So on double tap, on force press, and on long press, there are many, but we are going to use on tap. What does that require? It requires a function. Now to set the state of your widget, that is to rebuild it, there is a method called set state. Now this method is only available for the stateful for the state class. That is, you can only write it in a stateful widget. In this set state, I'm going to say that the value of my count variable, I'm going to increment it. So now as you see, when I tap this count value increases. I hope you can see it. Okay. So if I show you over here, okay, so it says build. Now I tap again, it's going to be built again. So whenever I say set state, this entire state class that is going to be built, whatever it is returning inside this build method runs again and again with the updated value of whatever variable you have set. So that is about state widget. So say you want to increase or decrease the size of your container on tap, or any change of state that you want to create. For that, you're going to use stateful widgets. Otherwise, if it remains same as it is, then for those widgets, you're going to be using stateless widgets. So the widgets that we have seen, container and rows and columns, so these are all stateless widgets because they don't change their state unless you wrap it around something like gesture detector, and or not just that, unless you do something like changing the state. So I can even put the dollar count over here. Okay, I don't need to use dollar. So I can use count and it will give me an error because it does not accept an integer, it accepts a double value. I'll increment 10 every time. So now my height is going to change every time I tap it because it is being built every time I tap it. Okay. So these are the simpler widgets, and these widgets, containers, column, row, these you are going to use in almost any Flutter application that you are going to build. Now let's look at something called custom paint. So these are available, and mostly these would work. But say you want to draw something of yourself, like in this application, in this UI that we are going to build, you can see these bubbles over here. Now there is no way to just create a circle at a particular place. Like obviously, you can create a circle even out of container by giving it some radius. But as you can see, it is in background. It is available over here, and you would want to draw not just circles but any paths and anything. So for that, we have something called a custom paint class, and you can extend your widget from this custom paint, and you can draw whatever you want. Instead of this center that we are giving in our scaffold, let's say we want custom paint. So yes, custom paint. Let's see what property it takes. It has something called a child, and it has something called a painter. I'm going to say my painter, okay, and I'll have to create that class over here. So this my painter class, we are going to extend from custom painter class. Okay, now let's override the important the method. So these two methods, paint and should repaint. So in custom painter, you have to have these two methods overridden. So there is something called, let's look at first, should repaint. So that is if you want your widget to be repainted whenever this is called. So currently we will return false because it is not changing. It will we don't want to repaint it every time. So we will return false over there. Now in the paint method, what properties it takes? So it has these canvas and size available. Now size, it will just, if I give a child over here a container of some size, then it will take that size as the size over here. Or you could, even in the custom paint itself, you can have something like size, where you can define the size you want to give. Mostly it will take the size of the child of the custom paint that is, and if that is not there, then you can also give your custom size over here. So what will custom paint do is whatever you draw over here, that is going to be drawn in the background, and the child that you are going to give will be built on top of this background. So if you want to draw anything, this canvas method is what gives you these so many of these methods, like say draw line or draw circle. Let's see, draw circle. In the documentation, if we see, we have something called offset that is needed, a radius and a paint. So this offset is going to be the center of your circle where you want your circle to be. You have to give some x and y values. That is defining that this is the center, a radius of 50. And then there is something called paint. So that will define how your circle is going to be drawn. Let's create that. Now paint does not have a constructor that is available, but you can set these different values. So say color, what color do I want? Okay, let's select blue. Similarly, you can set multiple properties of the paint class. Say style. The style is taking something called painting style. Let's see what that has. We can have fill or stroke, let's say stroke. Then we would also want to define the stroke width. Let's say 2. So then you can see that we have drawn this circle. Now if I change it to fill, then it will be a filled circle. So similarly, there are multiple methods that are there. Let's see some more. So flip path, which is requiring a, okay, let's say draw path. That requires a path and a pane. For that, we'll have to define a path. Okay. So when you're drawing a path, you will first need to have a method or called move to. So that is, you are taking your cursor at this position, say 2020. That is just going to take it over there. Okay, let's first define this paint value as well. So now you see nothing has actually happened because we didn't draw anything. We just moved our cursor at this position. Now we have something called this is move to. Now we have something called line to. Let's say x remain the same and y to change. Okay. So that is just defining this path, and then we say draw path. Why is that not working? Okay, okay. So the style is not fill but stroke. Okay, so now we can see this line. Obviously, it's not where we want. So something like this is the starting point. This is move. That is your cursor moved to this point, and then we lined it to this point. So you can take it anywhere. So why it was not working is the painting style was defined fill. Now obviously a line has to be a stroke. Now we move it to some other point. Let's say this is 80 and 100. Okay. Now say you want to close this figure, so then you don't have to again calculate this where it should go, but you can just say something like path.close. then it will close your figure. So obviously here we knew that the starting point was 20, so you could have just given path.line to 2020. But say if you are generating these points dynamically, then you wouldn't know. So you can use this path.close to close your figure that is there. So that is about custom data. Now let's look at something called animation. So before moving on to animations in Flutter, let's see what animations are. So, and what are animations? Why do we need them? And how to create animations? So animations are basically like if you have a container which has a certain size, and now you want to change the size of the container. So you want to increase the size of this container. Then you have two options. You can do it instantly, or you can do it gradually in a period of time. So why would you want to do that? Is just for user experience. It does not add any meaning to your application. It is just for user interface, but it looks good, right? Instead of doing it instantly, if you're gradually increasing this size of your container in say a second or two, then it would look good. Now the third thing is what you're going to need to create this animation. So animations in Flutter are not very simple like all of these widgets that we have used, like just writing app bar, then it has multiple properties and you can create this widget. The animation is not as simple like giving animation, say my start point, my end point, and say animate, so it's going to animate. It's not as simple as that. So first, what things would you require to build an animation? So let's see. Let's move on to our my widget class. So now this my widget class, it is a stateful widget. So for creating animations, you are going to require stateful widgets. Why? Is because obviously your state at every point is going to change. It looks to us as if it gradually went from 100 to 200, but it obviously will be divided into such small instances that it wouldn't be visible to us, right? So it changes its state at every certain point. Let me shift this class to the end. We don't require a just detector as well. Okay, now let's say I have this container and its size we want to change from 100 to 200, and that we want to animate it. We don't want our application to instantly change this size on one tap. So you will require this value of 100. You will require the value 200. You have to somehow tell Flutter that I want to change it from 100 to 200. Then you would require something called duration, that in 1 second I want to change it. So now to create this, you will also require some kind of clock that it will give ticks that at this tick you have to change the state. So let's see what we require. So these values, this 100 to 200, they are going to be changed, right? 100, then 110, 20, 30, so on up to 200. So these are the in-between values. So from the name in between, from the word in between, came the word tween. So this tween has properties of begin and end. So begin, I'm going to say 100, and end, I'm going to say 200. So what this tween does is it knows to give values of in values in between 100 to 200. But how will it give that? Like, is this screen enough for us? So let's see what this screen has. So it has something called transform. So that takes a double t value. So what is this value of t? Is at which particular instant of time do you want this? You want the value of green. Like green value is going to change from 100 to 200. So at this particular instant, I want this time. So how to get this? So for that, we have something called an animation controller. What is an animation controller? It is something that is going to control your animation. That is, it will drive this animation. Okay, now this animation controller requires a property whose value is going to be your class. Hence, we can't define it over here. We will define it in a method init state. So, what is this method init state? Is it will any initialization work that you want to do for your widget is you can do in init state. So it says that okay. So we have a super dot init state. We always have to write that over here because obviously we would want that to happen, and after that we can do whatever we would want to do in the initialization phase. This animation controller, it has multiple. So it has something called duration. So yes, we want to give a duration. We take the value as a duration object and give 1 second. Then something called, as it says, vsync that is required. So what is this vsync? We'll see this. So vsync is something that is somehow collaborating with the Flutter engine and telling what frames to deliver at every instant. And that will be, the frame will be defined this state by your state. But it gives some error over here saying this can't be provided to a ticker provider. So for that, your class has to be extended with a ticker provider. There is something called single ticker provider state mixin, a very, very long name. So there is something called a ticker provider state mixin and also something called a single ticker provider state mixin. So what is this? So that is going to give ticks at every say 0.05 seconds. It will give one tick when your animation will know that I have to change it my state. So we have two options of single ticker or the default one. So the default one uses multiple tickers, but we don't want to use multiple. It uses multiple tickers in itself, but for better performance, we'll use single ticker. So now that error is no longer available. So now what does this animation controller have? So can that be enough for us? Let's see. We had scene dot transform. Okay, and it requires this. So let's see what our animation controller has. So the value. So this value is a double value, but that is giving your text the current value of the animation. But nothing is going to happen. Why? Because we didn't actually start this animation. So what we want to do is we want to add a certain kind of we want to add a listener. So then whenever the state change occurs, this is what we want to do. So let's just write set state over here. and let's define the direction of this. Let's say forward. So the animation does work, but you wouldn't want to calculate this value every time. So for your ease, we have something called an animation as well, an animation object. So animation controller is basically an animation, but you can also, it is extended from animation, but you can also have an animation widget as well. And this animation we are going to set as screen.animate. Screen.animate, this method gives us an animation, and now let's add this listener on the animation itself. Animation controller will determine the direction, and animation is what is going to it is just used for E. So let's see this animate method that requires some values. So yes, it requires a parent. So now we will define over here our we will tell that animation controller is the parent over here. Now you wouldn't have to calculate this entire thing. You can just say animation dot value. Now we can see that it is animating. So why do we require all of these three again? So queen is just giving you the intermediate values that are there. Animation controller is the one which is controlling the animation because it takes in the duration and it takes in this ticker provider so that gives you the ticks. And this animate method returns an animation. So you don't require this, but this animation is a convenience, a kind of a convenience class available so that you don't have to calculate the value of animation at every instant. And so directly from animation.value, you will get this. But to do this set state in the add listener, this is not a very good practice. Let's see why. Because as we saw earlier, set state is going to build this entire thing. You can see multiple times this widget was built. So instead, what we can do is we can grab this with something called an animated widget. Name animated builder. Okay, so it does not have a child property. What it has is it does have a child property. Fine. Okay. What it has is this animation which we are going to set for animation. Instead of child, we have builder over here, and that takes the build context. Okay, so this also takes up another value over here. So now, if you see, now I'm going to remove this listener from here. It still works, and you can see that the entire widget was just built one time. So you can have you can have a column of widgets. There are multiple widgets, and only one widget of all of those is animated one. So you don't want your entire screen to be built every time, which is why using this set state over here is not a good practice. This is so for writing an efficient code, we are going to use something called an animated builder. So that is about animation. Now finally, let's go on to build this UI that is there. So let's identify what widgets are we going to require to build this entire widget. So as you can see, there is this 1, 2, 3, all these are arranged in a vertical direction. So we require a column. For this John and John Smith, it is in one row, and you can see like it is at the very, it is set at very end. Again, John and John Smith are separated, like they are in a vertical direction, so we can use a column there. We'll be using a column over here. These cards that are there, it is very much visible that they are defined in a grid view. Then we have these bubbles here. For this, we are going to use our custom paint. So let's start with that. Let's start with custom paint. So as you can see, we don't have any title over here, and the app bar that is there is completely white. So this text that is there, I'm going to remove that text. There should be something like color or background color. And we'll be building the widget in my widget. So now for using, for building this, I have multiple colors required over here. So all of these colors I'm going to define in a separate class over here, a class called app colors. That is just to for convenience that we can have all of the colors which are required for the application defined over here. Something like static final color. The color class has a method from RGB. Using this, you can give any values of RGB and an opacity, and then I can use this my color anywhere I want to use it. So for this particular application, what colors I have already defined it. Let me just paste it. These are the colors that we are going to use for this particular application. So over here, we can see that there is also something of these three icons. So you can either keep this icon, but it is a drawer over here. So then let's define a drawer. So now we have a drawer, but it's not visible because it's white in color. So this is how it is going to work. We have created a drawer. So let's change its color. So we have something called icon theme in the app bar itself. That is going to define the theme for your icon. We can have icon theme data, color as. So now we can just use this app colors and what is it, purple. Now it's purple. Let's remove this container from here. For now, we don't want any animation as well. Okay. So now over here, you can see that there is no such differentiation between the title and the class. But here you can see some shadow. So that can be removed as well. So we have a property of elevation, it can be set to 0. Okay, but this area is gray in color. So in our scaffold itself, we can have something like a background color, and we can define that as white as well. So then it's all just one color. Okay. So now let's start defining our column that is to be built. But before that, let's first create our painter, right? Let's first create this background that is there of these bubbles and how we can animate them as well. So we have seen animations as well, and we have seen custom paint as well, so it shouldn't be as difficult. So now we would want to draw these bubbles, so that is just drawing circles at certain offset, certain radius, and paint of color, let's say okay, so we have this bubble over here. Let's shift it a little more. And so now how do you animate this? Like if I want to animate this bubble, so in a way I want to give it a floating effect. So I will have something called offset over here. So my offset, and that I will define every time my custom painter is built in the uh, constructor itself. I'll say that this offset value is always required. Okay, not the custom painter, but my painter is the name of the class. So now it says that an offset value is required over here. So this offset I'm going to give the animation value so that it changes every time. So let's say that we want to change the value from not 100 to 200 but 0 to 10 in 1 second. So then I can add this value over here, my uh, offset, and let's see. Yes, why is it not working? So we've defined a plane, a controller, and animation. try to print this value of animation. It is changing. Okay, so that is not happening. For now, let's just say animation is we are adding something called a status listener, and we'll check if that takes a parameter of status, and if the status equal to true, completed, then we are going to say animation controller dot reverse. Okay, so why is it not happening is because we have given false over here. Obviously, we'll have to give it true so that it is built every time, and okay, now it is animating. We don't want it to just go like that. We will want it to go from 0 to, and we have added a status listener. So if the status is animation status dot complete, if it is completed, then we would want it to reverse. We would want the controller to reverse. Otherwise, if the status is not otherwise every time, but if the animation is dismissed, then we would want it to move forward. So now you can see it's kind of hovering over here. It's not very much visible because this value is too low. But I guess now it is visible that it is going back and forth. So I can give multiple of these bubbles in the entire screen with different colors and different offset values. So I can say plus or minus offset, so accordingly it will move in a particular direction. So that I have already defined, and I'm just going to paste it over here. These are multiple different circles with a random offset, plus offset or minus offset, so that they don't all just go in one direction, and a different color given to each of them. Now we can see that there are these multiple bubbles and they are animating. Okay, so that is about the background. Now let's move on to building these other widgets that are there on top of it. So let's go to this. So we will require an entire column for all of these widgets to be in. Then we will require a row which is taking the maximum size that is available, and inside that we will have another column for this John and John Smith. So where is our my widget class? Okay. So the center will be my. Okay, we're already over here, so we'll just define a column over here. Given as an array of widgets. Now we require one row for the name, a container for that purple gradient box that is there. This box, before that we will use a container, and for this we are going to use a grid view. As we know, we have to give a cross-axis count for grid view to not give us any errors. Okay. So now this row we are going to define. So this row is going to be aligned at the end. And what children will it have? So we can see over here that this is a text widget and this has some kind of background to it. So we will use container for it. So this text, again, it has some padding at the right side. So we will use some padding for that. On the right side, we have some padding at the 20. Then its child is a text widget. Not working. So now this John is visible over here, but we want to give some style to it. So for that, you're inside your text widget itself, you have a property called style that takes a text style. Let's format this thing. And there are multiple options over here like color, say colors dot. If you have already defined our colors, so app colors dot dark purple. And then we would want its size to be something, its font weight to be something. So there are multiple things that you can set over here. Say its font size we want to increase, its color we want to make different, we want to add some weight to it to make it bold, and a bit of letter spacing. So after this padding widget, we can have another container over here. This container, as we know, its child is going to be our text. That is going to be John Smith. Okay, so we don't want this to be in a row, we want this to be in a column. So, okay, so this was supposed to be a row, and inside this, we have this. So let's remove this entire thing from here. Let's see. So okay, now it's in below it because it is in a column. So now we want to give different decorations to this container. So we have something called a decoration. So for that, we can take box decoration. And that has multiple options. So we can have a color, which is app colors dot. So now we don't want it to be so small. We can give some kind of height and width to this container. In the decoration, one thing you can also give is the radius. So you see this box over here, we don't want it to be a box, we want it to have certain radius. So we have something called a border radius, and we just want it to be a horizontal border. A horizontal border with a left value of horizontal is only in the over here. So only the left side of the border we want to give a curve of 20. So that is what we have defined. Now this John Smith over here, it we want to align it We want to align it at the end, and we can give it some kind of padding. I'll give it some kind of padding, and we can add as child this text, and we can use our padding over here. Now it's properly aligned. Now this John Smith also we want to give certain style to it. So again, we have this, as we know, we have style widget for it. So okay, now it looks good, right? All right. So now after this container, now after this entire row that we have defined, we want another container over here. This container, again, if you see, we have certain padding over here. So let's just add some padding as well. And with that padding, we can give the child as container. So the decoration is again going to be the box decoration, and we are going to add some border radius to it. So this time we are going to select border radius dot all because we want border at all of these sides. As you can see over here, at every side we have some border radius available. Okay. Now after this we have something called gradient. Let's see if that is available. So in the decoration itself. Yes, gradient, creating a linear gradient. Let's see what properties it has. The colors property itself that is required over here. So we can give two of colors which we want to create a gradient of. Okay. Then we have something called begin and then something called end. So that is something like where do you want to start it, from the top left corner, from top right corner, from the center, or where. So we can say alignment dot center left to end to alignment center right. Again, these things you don't need to remember. If you will look into documentation, you will understand like what property, what kind of value this requires, and according to that, you can give it certain align the value that you want to give. Okay. So now, unless we have something inside the container, it's not going to be visible to us. So let's inside this container, let's okay, now when you press on this format, it is going to format it, but it won't do it properly unless you give commas after every property that is defined. Okay, so now the child of this container is going to be, first we will give it some padding. As you can see that there is a lot of padding inside over here. So we will give that padding. And then the child is going to be a row. By a row, So we have this symbol over here, a wallet symbol, and this entire column. So that these are going to be differentiated, and as you can see, we can use something like space between to put them at extreme ends. So let's say that the main axis alignment is space between, and then we have children, which is going to be, one is going to be our column. This column will have different text. So now this could be just one text, but this text, as you can see, one is little lighter and one is a bit darker, bold text. So then these can be separated via rows. Similarly, this can be separated via rows as well. And we can give different text styles to it. So that I think everyone must be pretty familiar with by now. So I'm just going to place that code over here. We have this column inside which we have the children as first is the text, normal text. Then we have a row for BTC and 22 as one is normal and one is having bold effect. Again for USD and this. So again, this is normal and this is bold. So just this column and it has these text, this row and two of the rows. So as you can see, these are defined over here. And to our row, we have said that it is space between. So now let's define that icon that is there. So again, to use these icons, you don't have to find them somewhere. We have them directly available with say icon widget, and what property does it take? Okay, we have to write it over here. These commas can be a bit confusing, but if you're using a nice editor, like if you're writing it in VS Code, then it gives you comments directly. Like it tells you that this is a row that is ending over here. So then it is easier. Dartpad unfortunately does not do that. So it can be a bit tricky to understand all of these commas, but that's okay. Like it's not built for writing these entire codes. It's just used for code snippets. Okay. So, there is a class icons which has multiple icons available. Like if you can see over here, there are multiple different kinds of icons that you can choose from. Almost all the material icons will be available over here. So then you can just use one of them, and you can even give it color. You can give it size if you want. So that displays our icon. Now the last thing in our column is going to be a grid view. So let's see where our main column ends. So this was our main column, right? Okay. Now I'm going to say grid view dot com. grid view, these are the children that we are going to give. These are cards over here. So I'll just make one method that is going to return a widget of this card over here, and then we can just use that to display all of these cards. Let's say returning a widget, my card. It will take certain value. Custom card which takes the icon data, which icon, what text, and in which color do you want to make this appear. And that is returning something called a card. So we have this widget card available with us. So that what is that used for? It gives you an elevation to your container by default, and it is going to make it appear like a card. So we can give it an elevation of some value, and then the child value. It again takes a child. Let's see what we have done over here. So I have given some padding, get some padding around each of these cards over here. And then inside a column, we can have this icon and the text that is there with some text style. So let's see, font size, we can directly give it something like 12, and that should be. And yes, the alignment for the column, the cross-axis alignment is start. At the very beginning, we want to start, and at so that is that we want to start on the left-hand side, and the main axis alignment is going to be space between. So that is given over here. So now all we have to do is use this custom card. So custom card with why I had done this screen width thing before is to make it more responsive, but for now we can just give it all one size. There's some error. I guess there is some error. Let's just do that screen width thing, right? Uh, so for that, I'm going to define the screen width over here. As we know that it is a state, it will be only built over here. So in the build method itself, we should define the screen width. And let's say a double of screen width. And where are we using that? Instead of giving the 12 font size, we can say that if the screen width is greater than 3, so we can make it 14. Otherwise, divided by 28. So that is according to the screen width, it is going to change this value. Here we still have some errors. Okay, so in the grid view, we can also give something called a child aspect ratio. that is going to be 1.5. So that is going to define how, in what shape your child is going to appear. By default, it is 1. That is, it will only make it look square. But if you give 1.5, then they are going to be somewhat rectangular. Like you can see over here, they are not perfectly square. They are rectangular. Okay. The reason why it is not working is it is a grid view. So it is going to require some space. It is going to scroll. So what it does is by default, it will not be able to understand what region I should be using. So something called expanded is what we are going to wrap it with. So what expanded will do is it will allocate all the available space that is there to our grid view. So now you can see it is visible. So previously grid view was not able to understand like where should I position, because any space that you give to a list view or to a grid view, even if I give the entire screen to display all of those children in just that screen is not enough, right? We want to scroll. So it does not understand that in what region am I allowed to scroll. So hence we wrap it with something called a expanded. So then we can also give it this grid view, we can give it some kind of a padding. And lastly, okay, so now it looks fine. And lastly, after this entire expanded thing, I've written this. Okay. So what is this doing is we have a container which has a very less amount of size but a large width. So that is going to create like a line, and that is color is given light gray color. So you can, it's not very much visible, but that is what we have in our UI. There is a line over here. So that is what is displayed over here. So now this drawer again, it's currently empty, but whatever we did over here, the similar kind of thing can be done in a drawer. You can have containers, text, whatever you want, however you want to define your drawer. Like we did with this UI, similar kind of thing you will be able to do over here as well. So you can maybe try that out. So that is it. We have built this UI and you can see it's pretty responsive as well. If you want to change this, like you don't always want to keep it to 2, we can do the similar kind of thing what we did with our font size. If the screen width increases a certain size, then we would want to divide it by 160. That is, we would want to increase this it again, and if the screen width increases, it will adjust it in just one line. So this is it, right? So like even if it is in web view, if you're using Flutter in web, then this is what it will look like. So you can adjust it accordingly, and you don't have to do much. Like over here, it's certain adjustments you have to make. Rest, it is pretty responsive in itself. Flutter is pretty responsive in itself as well. So that is it about this UI. I will share the link of my dartpad, of this dartpad with you, in which I've also like given something in the drawer as well. So yeah, that is it about the dartpad. So we've seen everything. We've seen the stateful and stateless widget, the custom paint widget. Any questions that you might have for me?
So thank you for showing us how to make uh, this beautiful UI and lots of widgets. And there were a few questions which
Okay.
were, however, even if they're not related, they are a few burning questions of Flutter community.
Okay.
Which state management technique do you like to work with?
Uh, Sorry, can you frame it again? Like
State management technique. Which state management technique do you like to work with?
in what way? I don't
Uh,
understand.
like,
Which,
for me, it is block and mobex, but I generally prefer mobex to manage states. Or
okay.
maybe let me add Bharat. Bharat may have some answers because he has tried many. Uh, Hi, Bharat.
Hi. So I would go with Mobex first.
Okay, you guys seem like you have pretty much experience in Flutter. Me, I don't have as much experience to answer this question.
Okay, no problem. We had another, yeah. So this is from us. Name a couple of widgets you like.
Okay, so my favorite one would be CustomPaint. Like you can draw whatever you want. That entire draw graph thing that you said about the package that I built, that is also completely built using this widget. So I am, you can call me an artist because I like to draw. And so if you like give me a canvas, entire canvas, and if you say like I can do whatever I want to, so that is something that I would like. So that is why CustomPaint is one of my favorite widgets.
And for me, it is animated container to animate anything.
Right.
Easy animation.
It is Scaffold.
Uh, why
Which
scaffold?
one? Okay, Scaffold. Easy, we can give any app bar, anything, whatever you like. Very easy, right?
Okay.
Okay.
So my next question is, where did you started learning Flutter, and what are the things that you keep in mind while learning Flutter?
Okay, so how I started was, okay, so when I started with Java, I built this small application, Hangman, in Java. So when I started with Flutter, that was my similar approach. I again built that entire Hangman app in Flutter as well. So I did this course on app brewery. Yes, so that is how that was a very small and very like introductory course, but that is the only it covered me most of these basic steps. But then I learned via building applications by searching docs online and stuff. Like I didn't do a proper course on Flutter. Only while building, I learned it.
Okay. Uh, Maybe I want to ask this to both of you, Bharat and Malia. What was the hardest concept or widget which you could not get around very easily at first?
Animation, very easy answer.
For me, animation.
Animation, right?
Okay, for me, okay, I was talking about widgets, but let me say, it for me it was state management. While calling APIs, so at first I was completely confused. How will you call APIs? I mean, where will you write API calls and how will you update the state? So it was confusing for me at first. And animation, I have tried a very little amount of animating things. So yeah, I'm pretty new to animations. Anything else we have, Bharat, or anything else you want to share, Malia?
Nope.
Okay.
So if that is all about the questions, then okay. So I have something to share over here. So if you are new and if you're just getting started with Flutter, I have written this blog, so you can maybe check it out. The Hangman app that I was telling about, I have shared how I built this entire app, and using this blog, you can build that too. It is somewhere to get started with. And this is the graph package that Sunny was talking about that I have published. Now again, I don't have so lot much of experience in Flutter as these guys do, but I was still able to like publish this package so that it shows how easy Flutter can be to work with. So you can these are the links to check it out. And we have something for you. This is a JetBrains voucher for any of the editors that JetBrains provides, any editors or IDs. So all you have to do is you have to give us your feedback. How did you like this session? Any suggestions for us? Or I'd like you to try on Dartpad yourself to build a certain UI and share that link with us. Share that link on how to on any Dartpad that you create. So give us your feedback and tag three of us, and by 15th we will let you know two of the random winners of this JetBrains voucher.
So yeah, that's great. I mean, I like working with IntelliJ IDEA, and before I jumped into Flutter, I worked with JetBrains Rider to write Xamarin apps, and it is
Uh-huh.
awesome experience to work with any of the JetBrains products. So yeah, I wanted to also ask you about how are students picking up Flutter? I mean, do they like it? Are they trying to make their projects in Flutter, or what is the
Yes, at least in our university, like after we introduced Flutter in a few sessions, and after people realized like how easy it can be, because with Java people were still trying, right? I'm not saying that Java isn't good. I mean, obviously it has its own benefits, but for us to work, like for students to work, Flutter would be very easy to start with. So yes, people are having quite an inclination towards Flutter.
So also to add into that, we have Vivek Parmar from DDU student, the DSC's chapter of DDU's chapter for Developer Student Club. So hi Vivek,
Hi everyone.
good evening.
Hi, good evening.
So I wanted to ask you the same thing. How are students loving Flutter? I mean, do they like it, or they have complaints about it? That's so many widgets
So
or
like
animations,
I would
or yeah.
I would not say myself a Flutter developer. I am a cloud developer. But yeah, so our Android team introduced Flutter back in, I guess, like November, I guess, Malia.
Yes, our first event
Yeah.
in November is when we introduced.
Uh, yeah, so we did that Flutter Interactive event, and we introduced Flutter for the first time in our university, and then students started gradually taking interest in it. Now some of the students have even built project in their final semester or the college projects, so they are even started building projects in Flutter. So yeah, people loving it, and it is very easy to learn. And so like we through the collaboration with Flutter Ahmedabad and various communities, we would like to help students so that they can even start with mobile development too, because mostly in college only web development is taught in our college. But yeah, so with the help of developer student club, we would like to be uh, generate some experience, or I would say some scope, or how important it is to that mobile development.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome experience for the beginners, and yeah, I have heard praises from students about Flutter. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining. And one more thing, I want to ask you students. Right now, there is code pen challenge going on, and code pen is similar thing like dartpad, but it has a few sharing features and a different kind of experience, social experience. So build something on CodePen, or you can pick this code which Maliha just showed us, and run it on CodePen, or try different things, experiment with it, and share it with us, tag us, and yeah. And I hope if you have any kind of ideas, or if you want to come up to the stage and show us what you are making or what you have made, then we'll be happy to have you here. Or you can contact DDU DSC; they will be happy. And yeah, we are excited to hear from you. Yeah, and uh, do we? Yeah, Bharat, anything to say? Because we are about to end.
Nothing from my side. Thank you for joining.
Okay, thank you, Malia, for joining and showing us everything, all the widgets and beautiful UI. And to all the audience, please stay safe, stay home, and keep building with Flutter. Okay, bye bye.
Like,
Bye.